Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to ChannelBK. My name is Brian, and welcome to another album review. This one is for the new Kil Moon record, Universal Themes. Kil Moon is the moniker of singer-songwriter, instrumentalist, and occasional actor, Mark Kozelek, and this is his 7th album under this title. For me, I've kind of jumped around through a couple of his older tracks, but my main sort of, introduction to him was with last year's album, Benji, which I loved. It was one of my favorite albums of last year. The overall theme that he had on this whole entire album was so just impactful. His intriguing way of being a singer-songwriter with sort of his streams of consciousness and sort of all the instrumentation was quite lovely. It was quite beautiful, and it had such a great tone, and you felt like you sort of went through a lot going on that album. And obviously when this album was announced, I was nervous because obviously, like Benji, I kind of had the ideas it was maybe going to be another Benji, but then I was like, I don't want that because I want to sort of see a little bit of a different side. Mainly because Benji's Benji, and this album should be what it is. And I sort of was a little bit on the fence with the singles. Not to say I hated them, because I actually really liked Possum. I thought that was really intriguing. Ali Spinks, we won't talk about that till later. And then Garden of Lavender, which was just this huge 10-minute track. And it was so graceful and so, eerie and haunting. So at that point, I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to love this album, but I'm really excited because out of the 3 tracks, 2 of them I really enjoyed. And this is definitely a lot to get through, mainly because it's about 9 minutes longer than Benji. It's 3 tracks shorter than Benji, and there's a lot going on. He sort of has the same technique on each track, where he sort of does his normal shtick. He kind of runs out of something to do. He goes into another musical breakdown where he just sort of plays, and then he comes back. And I know people had a problem with Benji because the tracks weren't shorter, or he kept singing or playing the instruments where they wanted him to just stop. I think this is even more so of the case. But on this album, to kind of compensate for those long tracks, the shortest being pretty much under 7 minutes, he did a little bit different things on all the tracks. For example, at the end of Garden of Lavender, This Is My First Day, he has sort of a spoken word section on Ali Spinks, and with a sort of grace, he has sort of more electric elements. And also on all these tracks, he does really interesting breakdowns. For example, on the Possum and Birds of Flims, which had beautiful sort of interesting instrumental sort of slowdowns, which I thought were gorgeous. But overall, this album doesn't really seem like it has a consistent theme or anything. It's a lot of vignettes of Mark and his life. We get focuses on him and his girlfriends, him and this possum that he finds that passes away, him being in this movie that's going to be coming out. There's a lot of different things that he's pulling from that are actually brought up on a lot of these tracks. But to me, there's really never any consistent songs in terms of stories. I think Garden of Lavender kind of feels that way, and I think Ali Spinks is also another track that feels like it kind of goes from one place to another, and it ends nicely in that way. But starting off this album, obviously, as I was talking about, the Possum, which is a track sort of dealing with the little things in life that we don't notice as much. And this track is really odd because it's just focusing on the death of this possum, and just his storytelling so vivid. And that's, again, something that's so great about him with this album and his last album. It's just how in-depth it is. But on the tracks where he really gets you musically and his lyrics work, you just feel invested into the whole story. And then Birds of Flims has a lot of great, interesting things going with it. This is probably tied for my favorite track. Gorgeous track, some nice guitars. There's a little bit of heavier stuff near the end with some extra vocals, and like I said, this has such a beautiful breakdown for about 30 seconds or so before it goes back into the normal instrumentation on this track. Cry Me a River, Williamsburg Sleeve Tattoo Blues, had sort of this slow, moody build up to it. It felt a little bit heavy. This was a pretty funny track. I really was intrigued with the storytelling from reading into his interview with LP, and Garden of Lavender was just epic. This is my other favorite track. 10 minutes long. I was so invested. There's so many places he's pulling from. He has sort of a part where he goes downtown and sees the Christmas lights, where there's that extra sort of violin, I believe. I love the imagery at that part. And then when he goes back to a moodier track, he has a couple other great lines before an added banjo comes in, which I thought was great because of the extra vocals that come in too. And then this also has, like I was saying earlier, a spoken word at the end. And then This Is My First Day, which weirdly enough sort of ends kind of the same way Benji did, with Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for a Cutie sort of at the end, and he has that spoken word with some funny thing about how his phone is still a flip phone and the whole thing with the genius. I thought that was kind of funny. But I really like the storytelling in this track because it's a bunch of sort of different vignettes, like I was saying. But weirdly enough, like the chord progression reminded me a teeny bit of Dogs from Benji. It reminded me just a little bit when I first heard the track. But I thought this was another good track too. Obviously, I sort of set a couple complaints. It is a lot to deal with, and there's not as much impact with what he's doing on here lyrically and whatnot as Benji, but the main problem with this album to me was the electric. I didn't care if the electric guitars were going to be on it. It's a different flavor. I think on With a Sort of Grace, it was fine because I kind of grew to like it on that track because it kind of came off of it, then it went back, and so that was sort of fine. And I felt like that track was cool to have the rugged guitars with the story he was telling, whereas Ali Spinks was a great story of sort of him with his girlfriend for the night, and it was a really nice story how he told it, but that electric was just bleh. And I think this was the weakest song in terms of variation because he slows down and then he speeds it back up. Like, it's just sort of the same thing throughout the track, and I feel like this track didn't need that at all. I felt like that track would have worked much better without it. But overall, I definitely still enjoyed this album because when I first heard it, I was a little turned off. Then when you sort of get a new mind frame about it and you go into it with a different expectation and a different point of view, I think it still works out very well. I don't think a lot of the things he did were obviously as great as Benji, but the songs that were on here and what he tried to do in terms of variation and sort of doing this interesting tale, I thought was really cool and again, just very interesting. And it's sort of a switch up from what he did with his last album, which I know a lot of people are sort of comparing with that. And I know people are gonna hate, like, oh, well, you can't compare. It's just human nature. And like I said, I sort of had to come off that, and then when I re-listened to it, I was like, okay, I'm liking this, because on first listen, I was a little turned off. Besides sort of like the 2 or 3 tracks at first that I liked, I sort of grew to like a lot more of the elements that he brought because I was really into what he was trying to do. But yeah, overall, I definitely like this album. What you guys think? Do you find this better than Benji? Do you still find Benji better than this? Where does this rank in his discography? What are some of your favorite tracks on this album? Leave all that in the comments below. If you liked, please like, and also please subscribe if you want more music reviews as well as some movie and television reviews. Original stuff hopefully rolling out soon. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in to ChannelBK. Peace out, guys.